and you talk about this idea of these electrochemical signals, and that reminds me of this whole piece about the polyvagal theory and the social nervous system. That's so interesting. So can you tell us what that is?
Sure. So most of us in high school, we or middle school, whenever you learned about the autonomic nervous system, most people learned that it was either sympathetic is fight or flight and parasympathetic is rest and digest. But that's actually a mixed metaphor. That's comparing apples to oranges. So if we're going to go apples to apples, or if we're just going to like take away that and we're going to go passion fruit to passion fruit, there's a whole other branch of the system. So it's not just two systems, there's another branch. And then we need to compare the branches when there's safety and when we're under threat.
Yeah,
So
I
a
think that's right.
sympathetic fight or fight response under threat is a fight or flight response. A parasympathetic response under threat is a freeze or collapse response.
Okay. Mhm. Gotcha.
So when it comes to vagal, polyvagal means many branches of the vagus nerve. So that's what polyvagal theory means.
Mhm.
The vagus nerve has two branches. It has one that's ventral. Ventral means the front of your body. And it happens to be, in this case, heart, your literal physical heart, up into your head and neck and face. And then dorsal is the back of your body, back of your head, back of your neck, your flanks, basically. So this other tier is your social nervous system. That's the ventrovagal system. It developed for maternal bonding. So
Mm.
it's the fine muscles around your eyes.
Mm.
It's usually the most functional at 18 inches, which is breastfeeding distance.
Hmm.
And it's what's conveying, it's a survival mechanism so that we know how our young is feeling and they will survive, because as humans we have this like incredibly long period where our young are dependent on us compared to most other mammals. So in order that they survive, there has to be a level of attunement. They have to know from our facial expressions, from our vocal tone, uh, from the content of what we're saying, we have a coherence, and therefore we're conveying to them safety.
Mhm. Mhm.
In the social nervous system, this is a little controversial, and this is the part that's the newest in both evolutionarily, but also in scholarship.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of debate and inquiry about, well, okay, so if that's where belonging happens, social connection. And people usually like to say, well, animals like birds have really complex social networks. Totally. But it's different because it's not operating from the same
Well, but it's
ventral
interesting, like,
system.
as you described that with, like, the eyes and that close connection, I'm recently like, for the last year and a half, I've been a dog owner, and, like, that whole thing with the eyes with the dog and that connection, I'm like, "Stop at the dinner table because you're killing me." But
That's because
that
you have
sounds
one of
like
the doodles that are basically humans. Those dogs are like humans. I dog sat one of them once and it spooned me. And I was like,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
is
my
going
dog spoons
on?
me. Yeah, totally. Yes, yes. She's a
Uh,
pretty pity, but yeah, I mean that they're like highly social, you know, herd or pack animals or whatever, the same way humans are. I mean, I don't know. Am I reaching here?
I don't know. I don't know that much about
Yeah.
animal behavior. Although so the other response under threat in the social nervous system, when we're not feeling connected, mirrored, well attuned, we don't feel we belong. We feel like we have to alter ourselves for belonging,
Hmm.
which is really the level that our culture is relating at this moment, where there's all this kinds of ways that we're sending messages to each other about what we have to do to say the right thing or do the right thing in order to belong somewhere. And we're also differentiating more. We're needing safety and homogeneity so that hopefully at some point we'll create some different power structures so people feel more comfortable relating in mixed environments. Who knows when that'll happen? Um, so at the social level, the response that maybe some people listening have heard of before is called, one of them is called fawning.
Mm.
And fawning is really came into popular discourse, I think, mostly during the Me Too movement, or the resurgence of it, this most recent one in 2017, uh, because fawning is when you go closer to a threat. And the social nervous system dynamics are really impacted by power. So if you're in a position of less structural power, it behooves you to behave in certain ways that are dictated by the person who has more structural power. And if you can approximate it, it's less threat than if it's farther away from you. So all of these situations that we saw of women going up to hotel rooms that from the outside seem like, well, why would you do that? Why would you, when you're in it, your physiology is telling you that it's safer for you to do that than it is for you to have the consequences of it farther away, or why someone returns to domestic abuse, or why someone is assaulted by someone and could continue a relationship with them. It's a system that's also profoundly impacted by hormones, because it evolved for maternal bonding. Maternal bonding is based on estrogen and oxytocin. So female hormones like estrogen and oxytocin predispose us towards how we relate with each other. So, in some people call it a superpower. It's a superpower because we're highly attuned and we're wired for that attunement. The flip side of that is that we're also disproportionately impacted by the flip side of that, which is really being so concerned and attuned about what everyone thinks about us and how everyone perceives that we are. And so we choose either this fawning, which is being really super nice, appeasing, um, tolerating, or the flip side, fitting in, which is camouflaging, not standing out, not saying what you think or who you are. And if you look at it in a racial spectrum, then fawning is more like code switching, like I'm going to do the thing or behave in a submissive way so that I'm not punished by this power dynamic, or I'm going to assimilate and I'm going to erase my difference so that I don't stand out, so that I'm less likely to be harmed.
Wow.
So we
Yeah.
have a lot of but people think that this is a rational thing, and it can be. I mean, you can choose to code switch, but it becomes ingrained and it becomes personality, and then it's passed generationally because it's survival. And the same goes for female male. Like, we're coded for being able to locate danger, and how we locate it is usually through these facial expressions and coded. We could call it body language, but it's a little bit deeper than body language.
Huh. I thought that was so interesting. Social nervous system. I mean, the way you describe it, to me, I just think high school. Oh my gosh, like that's high school all right there. Like fawning and fawning and fitting in.
Fitting
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, we're
Yeah.
trained in a lot of different ways. Like, socialization is one thing, but we're also, we were talking about feeling good earlier in this conversation. Most of our families have some kind of a cap on feeling good. You can feel good, but don't feel too good, because that might make someone else feel bad, right?
Mm,
Don't don't and that could be, or don't earn more money than everyone else,
mhm.
or don't earn less money than everyone else. Like, there's a norm, and stepping outside the norm, there can be consequences, either actual ones, or inside of you. What you were describing earlier is that the perception is that you're going to lose connection, and losing connection is actually life threatening. So this is where it's people try to make that into an emotional thing, like, oh yeah, but that's an emotional need, that's not actually a survival need. But it actually is a survival need. Connection is a survival need.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard for us to accept as Western human beings that emotional that connection is a survival need. We're, I don't know, rugged individualists, right? And gosh, we're not going to be interdependent. That sounds really scary to
Yeah,
everybody, I'm
we
sure.
don't have any, like, it's like in interdependence, people automatically are like, that's either weak or it's codependent. So we don't really have a good model for that. But
Hmm.
we're at a juncture where I think we're starting to get it, because there's so many people are suffering from loneliness and isolation. And then, of course, the pandemic has just brought, like, tore off the lid of Pandora's box for that. So really coming back into this understanding that the social nervous system, we're all impacted by it. And what we really need there is connection. We need to listen to each other. We need to validate stories. So in spiritual practice, a lot of times it's like we say, like, get out of your story. And this book is really about making meaning that's outside of your rational mind. So you're letting your body and your psyche inform you of meaning. And at the same time, we have capacity to sit with people who don't think the same things that we think, maybe. And we don't have to do what's happening, which is everyone chooses a side, labels themselves, and then demonstrates that side that they're on, and just gets in a reinforcement loop because no one's actually talking to one another about that, maybe have different opinions. And we're letting that narrative get shaped for us both through social media and the news. And our nervous system, while it is wired for connection, it's also wired to perceive danger. So part of when we were talking about pleasure is developing what's right attention. So our nervous system is going to go to what's wrong in an effort to protect us. And then the culture's feeding that back to us. So it's everywhere we look if we want to find it, ways that things aren't right and aren't working and are terrible. And it doesn't mean Pollyanna. It doesn't mean being a gradualist necessarily and telling people, look how far we've come. It's really more of a personal thing where you recognize what's around you and you're able to actually take in information that's happening in real time and know that what is right is going to give you the sustenance and the stamina to be able to make your own decisions, act from your center, become a trustworthy ally, become a reliable parent, repair when there's ruptures, right? I'm sure you've done a million episodes on that. It's like, we're not going to do it perfectly, but there's always repair possible. But to repair with ourselves and repair in our immediate community and then repair beyond our community, we have to have a trustworthy center. And the way to develop that is also to develop a relationship with what is working.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Janla Van Zandt, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.